Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here as always with my good friend and colleague Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to be talking about a subset of the population today out of the Healthy Heroes study. So shift workers, specifically physicians, nurses, police, pilots, firefighters, the frontline workers that we are so appreciative of. But you guys are subject to having increased cardiometabolic risk. So we're going to be talking in detail about a study that has recently come out, but that doesn't let the rest of us off the hook because
No, it does not.
there is a large segment of the population that also has the same lifestyle disruptions as our frontline heroes, right? As the people that are out there that have flipped their life, right? Because of their work outside of that standard 9 to 5. So today's episode, we feel is going to be applicable to all of us. We're going to talk about decreasing those cardiometabolic risks, and then also specifically for those shift workers on how you guys can still incorporate a fasting lifestyle to lose the weight and get healthy, which is the whole point of fasting from our perspective, Tommy. If you guys are new to the podcast, please go back, listen to episode 0 and episode 1 if you feel so inclined. I went back and listened recently. We sound different, not just technology-wise, like microphone-wise, but we sound different. But our story still stays the same. It is tried and true to why we are here almost 3 years later, still delivering weekly episodes. So if you want to learn more about who we are and why we do what we do, head back, give us a listen with a little bit of grace. And I also want to give a shout out to Travis, who recently gave us a 5-star review. So if you are so inclined, we love reviews. That tells the podcast gods that we're doing something good and providing value in this podcast space, because we know today everybody has a podcast, but you guys are supporting this one specifically, and we just could never imagine now millions of people that have listened to us. So very grateful for all of you new listeners, you longtime listeners as well. And Travis, we want to give you a shout out from the most recent review that we just saw come through.
Yeah, Travis said 5 stars. Great fasting podcast. I've listened to quite a few fasting podcasts, and this is by far my favorite. I like how each mine too. I like how each episode completely dives into a topic, clear explanations, professional production. Ooh, thank you. Binge listen while driving, and then a little smiley laughing face. So thank you, Travis, again. We appreciate that because we know it takes a few seconds. Our time's valuable, right? And it takes a few seconds to do that. So we definitely do appreciate that. So thank you again.
So that's the segment, the self-aggrandizing segment of today's podcast episode. But I love that he said it, I've listened to a lot, right? And the whole sound thing, I'm like, man, I went back and listened. Yeah, we have leveled up. So thank you, Travis. Thank you guys.
And thanks for the grace from everybody too.
Yes. We're figuring it out too. So we believe we've leveled up as we go through this, and we want to continue to provide you value each week. So let's get into today's conversation, Tommy. Time-restricted eating for improving cardiometabolic health in shift workers. So this is a randomized controlled trial. And as always, we find some things interesting in here. But big picture, we want to start off with 27% of the U.S. workforce. So as we mentioned, the frontline workers, the physicians, nurses, police, pilots, firefighters, truck drivers can even fall into this category as well. We have a lot of y'all that listen on the road. And you guys, this came out of the Healthy Heroes study because you guys are the frontline heroes of our society, right? So I love that they named it this. And shift workers are frequently subject to the erratic light-dark cycle, sleep disturbances and sleep activity that's taking place outside of your standard circadian rhythm patterns. Eating and fasting patterns are all dysfunction because of when you're working, right? And that leads to that chronic circadian rhythm disruption, which is at the crux of some of the stuff that comes out of this study. And we'll break down the specifics here in just a minute. But it's important to know that it's not just the fact that you're operating outside of the 9 to 5, but it's what is it doing to your circadian rhythm and your metabolism and your body's normal circadian processes.
Yeah, and even like your hormonal cycles that actually come along with those disturbances, and the circadian rhythms are like, they're such a major driver to a lot of those hormonal cascades that we rely upon, and that are going to come up in blood work and in our waistline and in our visceral fat and all the things that matter, and then later disease processes. You know, so if we can do things to mitigate and to compensate and to understand which levers can we pull to like do better than whatever the kind of status quo is, or the path of least resistance is. Because you're doing shift work like overnight, you might have dinner at 3 a.m. or something else, you know, like crazy. But at the same time, even if you got enough sleep prior to that shift, your body is like freaking out right now because my insulin response is not matching up with the circadian rhythm, with the light dark cycle that's happening right now. It's just, it's kind of like havoc. So what can we do to do better? Because we know that shift workers are at a higher risk for all of these things, these cardiometabolic diseases. And we need to get a handle on some of that so that we can continue to perform our job functions and other things like that, and still maintain control over our long-term health outcomes.
Yeah, and that's the thing with shift work. It's a necessary component of society, right? So we need feasible strategies to offset the negative effects of that shift work.
Absolutely.
And to improve our overall health, right? So already you're on the front line, but we don't need to be putting this group of people that keep our society going at a higher risk, right? So we know that shift work elevates the risk for obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So in this study that we'll break down in just a second, I will say it is male dominated in this study. There was only a small subset of women that were in this randomized control trial. There was 137 shift workers total, and it was done in firefighters, right? So age 23 to 59, there was no diagnosed diseases, right, of these cardiometabolic diseases that we've mentioned, but 71% of these people had one of the risk factors. So something elevated on their blood work, some symptom of an underlying issue, which we know is specifically with blood sugar related issues, that 8 or 9 out of the top 10 reasons why people die here in the United States are due to blood sugar related imbalances or insulin to some degree. So when we're looking at this, some of you are hopefully still listening that aren't shift workers, because in addition to that, a large segment of the population also has a lifestyle or an outside influence that disrupts their circadian rhythms, similar to a frontline shift worker.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, meaning individuals that have to stay awake for 2 to 3 hours between the time of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. for at least 50 days a year. So this could be caring for a loved one. This could be scrolling TikTok for hours, blue light disruption, right?
Yeah,
Staring at a screen. This could be your dogs, right? Or your cat waking you up. This could, for me, just this week, it was my son up all night. Newborns, babies, loved ones, right? So a large proponent of the population also has this disruption, and not due to the fact that they don't work a 9 to 5, but because of, care responsibilities and even social jet lag. So the social aspect of life, going out for dinner, having drinks, et cetera, which is one of the big takeaways we'll talk about here that we found interesting from the study regarding alcohol. We'll get to that in just a minute.
Yeah, college students, right? Like studying, pulling all-nighters and things like that. Or, you're a professional and it comes to, that part of the quarter or whatever it might be, and you're burning the midnight oil, burning the
accountants,
the candle at
CPAs
both
during
ends.
tax time. Yeah.
Oh man, it's crazy.
If I would have known, I have an aunt who's a CPA, and it's always like, all right, talk to you after tax season. It's like, okay, bye. Good seeing you.
Going into my cave. Yeah.
Right.
Who knows
I wish I would have known, all that, wearing that as a badge, right, of honor in the restaurant business for years. And then, undergrad and grad school, always being the guy pulling the all-nighters. I wish I would have known that was really building my issues that finally showed up in clinic when I was running an office in my mid-30s. Like, I had no idea that all of that stuff was a component of those, just like these people, the shift workers in this study, these firefighters, 71% of them have one of the red flags raised about a future problem related to obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So
building those layers of resistance now.
Yeah, just one of those big ahas for me coming out of this study. So it was a really cool randomized control study. So, let's break down some of the study, and then we'll talk about some of the outcomes.
Can I interrupt you for
Please.
one moment?
This is what we do.
Yeah, it's just the fact that we've said shift workers a lot, but the fact of the matter is that it's that transition between like being on and being off that can be really, really tough. And we all have some component of that in our day-to-day life. I mean, like nobody
especially if you're trying to like tiptoe around the word dieting.
Yeah.
On off. Yeah. I don't know if that's where you were going, but that's what just triggered.
Well, yeah, that's part of it for sure. And then, but even like one or two late nights here, a little less sleep over here, or, whatever it might be like nighttime lifestyle, like behavior patterns, whatever it might be, it leads to the same stuff. It's just like when we talked about sleep disturbances and how getting less than 6.5 hours, like just on one night leads to an insulin resistance spike the very next day. Does it come back when I regulate my sleep? Absolutely. But the fact of the matter is that one night that the insulin resistance peaked, that didn't do good things. That deposited a little bit more visceral fat than it should have been, or it might have a small, tiny effect on the waistline. That's just gonna
has a huge effect for me on food choices.
Yeah,
if I had less than 3 hours a few nights ago, and I had an afternoon planned of productivity, I was shot, and all my brain could think about was I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. Because we know that one night can disrupt your insulin sensitivity, like you said, insulin resistance. And for me personally, those cravings. So imagine extrapolating that out, never mind just during this 12-week study, but to 365 times a year, then times a decade, then times a quarter of your life.
Right. Each one of those incidents is like, I'm a shift worker tonight.
Yeah.
So think about yourself like that when we're going through this study.
Now, we are not equating scrolling on your phone to TikTok to being a police officer on the front lines. Okay. No. But physiologically speaking, there's a lot of overlap there in terms of what's happening to the disruption of the circadian rhythm. So I love that point. So let's talk about the study. 137 shift workers, firefighters ages 23 to 59. Interestingly enough, the control group was a 14-hour eating window, right?
Okay.
And the time restricted eating, or the TRE group, was 10 hours.
Yeah. Okay. To maybe 11.
So we haven't even gotten to in our world, fasting.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to fasting.
We're like knocking at the door of fasting.
They're warm-up fasting. Okay. Both groups ate a Mediterranean diet.
Nice.
Okay. So it was interesting because there were some changes that took place. And they say that in the big picture, some of those changes were probably directly related to, the standard of care, which is the control intervention, which was a healthy Mediterranean diet. Because some parameters, including systolic blood pressure, fasting blood glucose, and CRP, which is inflammation, and we'll break these down individually here in a second, also improved in the control group. So there was some overlap here because both groups reduced their caloric intake and their opportunity to eat by about 16% on average, and both groups increased fruits and vegetables. So we're not turning a blind eye to the fact that, you're focusing on your health. Wow, things improved. But there was some cool discrepancies or improvements in the TRE group that did not take place. So let's just kind of go through some of these, Tommy, in the control group versus the TRE group, right? So I'm going to list off primary and secondary. The primary and secondary metrics that they were tracking here, the primary study outcomes were the feasibility of TRE and the adherence to TRE. So speaking to our soul.
Yeah. Is it sustainable?
Set
Can
your
I actually
timer.
do this? Yeah.
Set your timer. Stick to a fasting window, right? And they were determined by how often participants ate within their self-selected, which I thought was really cool because shift work, it changes. That large population of, that we talk about that isn't on the front line, but is also having the same circadian changes due to life stresses and kids and all the stuff we mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a self-selection process. So we don't believe in here's your meal plan, here's your long-term solution.
Yeah.
It's on you to kind of trial and error and figure out what's going to be a sustainable solution for you. That's why we don't like fasting as a diet. We like fasting as a lifestyle habit adaptation. So the glucose regulation, so we're talking about fasting blood glucose, HbA1c, insulin, and insulin sensitivity were also assessed as primary outcomes. And the secondary outcomes were body weight, body mass index, body fat percentage, quality of life, love it, sleep, and then the cardiometabolic, mouthful, disease risk factors, including cholesterol, triglycerides, and C-reactive protein, as well as systolic and diastolic blood pressure numbers. So they were all assessed at baseline and then again at 12 weeks. It's a really cool design study.
Yeah, that is cool because we don't see a lot that take into account for like quality of life and some of those other markers. Like that's pretty comprehensive right there, as far as like painting an overall health picture. So it is cool whenever you start to look at the actual results of it and go, well, even the control group had a few things like, improve a little bit of blood pressure improvement, a little bit of HDL improvement, a slight CRP, and a slight fasting blood glucose improvement. But it went well beyond that for the more strict, deliberate group that was doing 10 to 11 hours of time restricted feeding, where you had some additional benefits come into play. But I just thought a cool point right there is just the fact that going from not thinking about the time or the compartmentalization of your actual eating to just compartmentalizing it with some intentionality over time equals some really good normalization going on, especially within this increased risk group, because everyone who was in this study who already had like elevated numbers, their numbers improved more. So you had a lot of folks who maintained at kind of a baseline, especially in the control group, but they didn't have any elevation. They didn't have anything like out of whack already. But if they had something that was dysregulated or uncontrolled, there was improvement.
If they were, so what you're saying there is if they were one of the 71% of the study that had one of those abnormal markers indicating a future problem, right? Like a cardiometabolic relationship, then they saw the biggest change compared to the control group, even though the control group still saw that change. So the windows here are so contradictory to my brain, but it reminds me of the restaurant business, at the restaurant 2, 3 a.m., going to bed, waking up, getting that meal in before I go to bed in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Morning.
Got to have my dinner. My late dinner. Yeah.
So in the control group, the 14-hour window was 7 a.m. to about 10 p.m. And my dad used to work Saturday nights, and he would go to bed at around 1, 2, sometimes 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. But then he'd get up at 10, and then he would eat dinner and then go to work. And then he'd have his lunch in the middle of the night. And then he would come home and eat a meal and then go to bed. So that it was around those same timelines. He would get home on Sunday, between 10 and 11, and he would eat, right? So it really, like real life application, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I remember that happening when I was growing up. In the TRE group, their window was a couple hours later in the morning, so 9 a.m., and they stopped at 7 p.m. So that 3-hour window, a little bit of variability, self-selected, by the way, which I really love. Interestingly enough, the TRE group adhered to their 10-hour eating window on approximately 5 days of the week, and then consumed food or beverages outside of their eating window 1 to 2 days a week. So about 25% of the time. Yeah. That reminds me of the 5-2 or the Monday through Friday or the 3 or 4 days on, 3 or 4 days off. If you're in the medical field, right? You're on call, you're not on call. Firefighters on call, you're not on call. So Monday through Friday, I got the weekend. 5-2 air quotes diet. Normal on 5 days, fasting on 2 days. It was cool just to see that kind of inherently came out without being directed to do so.
Yeah, even if you went about your week and you let up a little bit, I'm not talking going like full on weekend warrior or anything else like that, but if it was just kind of like I'm more deliberate about it, or I have tighter windows, tighter boundaries maybe during the week, and then on the weekend I loosen it up just a little bit more flexibility just for real life purposes. Of course, if that's working. If that's not working, maybe I need to tighten it up some more. But just the fact that they weren't looking for perfection in this study is a really cool, I think, takeaway. That's kind of what I heard there.
Yeah, no, I love that it just inherently came out and it matches so much of the other stuff that we hear so often, right? The struggle of like long-term sustainability. So I love that this, first of all, the results were so incredible just in a 14-hour window. Like without any other than, hey, eat a Mediterranean diet, here you go. Yeah. And then the 10-hour window, just 3 hour, well, it was 11, 3-hour difference. Rat-a-tat-tat over 12 weeks. The control group saw a decrease in systolic blood pressure, decrease in fasting blood glucose, decrease in CRP, which is an inflammatory marker that messes with your hunger signals and your effectiveness of your insulin and your leptin, and a slight increase in the good, air quotes, good cholesterol. Now, the TRE group, right? So the 3 hours less group, decreased weight and BMI, increased insulin sensitivity. So the effectiveness of the insulin, decreased systolic and diastolic blood pressure, decreased fasting blood glucose, decreased A1C, decreased VLDL particle size, decreased sleep disturbances.
That's big, especially for shift workers.
Right?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah,
and
huge.
Again, decreased CRP. So there's a couple of little things we want to highlight here in that list. But a lot of the times people come and say, okay, how do I start fasting? What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, ideally, you want to get to that 18, 20, 24-hour mark as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Because never mind if you're going to see the benefits here, man, you're going to see some dramatic changes in the scale and in your insulin resistance when you push those windows. But there was some cool things in here, especially related to the sleep and the alcohol, that we wanted to highlight.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's incredible when we start to get off of the starting block, off of like that 14, 16 hour, where a lot of folks, especially when we have more weight to lose or we have more insulin resistance, it can feel like it's really not working, but I'm not really sure how to get to the next step. Like just the fact that this compartmentalizing into this 10-hour eating window and getting that lower sleep disturbances right there, I feel like that probably led to a lot of the beneficial effect on the insulin sensitivity, because we know the two work hand in hand. And when you're a shift worker, you are fighting those sleep disturbances right there. And just like when you were talking about your dad coming home and like,
we had to go outside. We had to go upstairs. It was like, Dad's got the fan on. He's got the door closed, the towel at the bottom of the door. We were in a tiny little apartment, but like, don't wake him up.
Sleep quarantine. Yeah.
Yes.
Protecting it. But probably before that sleep ensued, like you said, he had to get that meal in, right? Like that dinner meal, which is like maybe just an hour or two, whenever I can squeeze it in before I need to get that so important sleep right there that I need to protect. However, counterintuitively, that meal so close to when I actually need that sleep is going to be disturbing of that sleep too. So if I can compartmentalize that a little bit more and don't have that meal so close to when I need that sleep, I need to protect that sleep, I'm going to have better results right there. And that seemed to be displayed here, in the results of the study. And the alcohol portion was crazy too, because this was kind of like an afterthought here. They didn't tell the participants to control their alcohol at all. There was nothing there. But the decrease in alcohol consumption that just naturally occurred within both of these groups, it was a small decrease in the control group, but it was 2.5 times larger of a decrease within the TRE group, the one that was at 10 or 11 hours compartmentalized there. And I got a couple of theories on that.
I was going to say, I didn't see anything in there that really stood out. So I'm interested to hear this.
Yeah. Because like that goes hand in hand with the sleep disturbances, with the insulin resistance as well. So like it's an important factor. At the same time, like not being told to actually decrease your alcohol consumption, but then seeing a decrease, that speaks to me to like nighttime behavior patterns and like, slippage and just
you can't see me because we're on a podcast, but I'm raising both of my hands. This was one of my big problems for years.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the effect of alcohol and what it does to your fat burning, which completely shuts it down.
Yeah.
But like those behaviors in those time periods.
Right.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's so huge. Yeah.
The sleep badge of honor that goes along with, well, I'm awake and I'm doing other things, and maybe they're productive things, but either way, like I'm not asleep and I'm not compartmentalizing. I'm not focused on like the sleep discipline, let's call it right now. And then it's like, okay, well, alcohol, I might have a drink with me. If I have the drink, I might have something to snack on too, especially something salty or crunchy or something like that. Or it could go in reverse too, where I have like a late night snack, maybe a drink goes along with it. Either way, it's going to lead to sleep disturbances, let alone like more calorie intake coming in as well. But when we start to compartmentalize, having better controls on like when is it that I'm actually stopping my consumption time, and then it leads to better sleep, which leads to less sleep disturbances in the upcoming days too. Like I feel better, I have better boundaries, and then all of a sudden, like I'm consuming less alcohol to go with it. And then the health effects are there. Like I'm reducing some of the stress on my liver. That's the key component to fat burning and metabolism too. So like it's amazing how synergistically all of these things are like working in tandem, hand in hand here.
I want to talk about that quality of life piece for a second too, because one of the quality of life and sleep category, which is one of the things that I really loved about this, was, yes, there were no changes in duration, quality, daytime sleepiness in either group, but the disturbances. So I wear a Whoop, and I can tell you my recovery is going to be better when I have less disturbances. This isn't rocket science, okay? It's duh, okay? My body can recover better. But the quality of life piece was really cool. They looked at the SF36, which is a 36-item short form survey, subcategories for both physical and mental health scores, which I thought was really cool because we did see some improvements in the physical ability to perform, which if you're a firefighter in this study, that's not trying to be cheeky here, life or death performance on the job for you.
Yeah.
Right. So nurses, doctors making decisions.
Yeah.
Like
mental
huge
acuity,
implications,
strength,
right? Mental acuity, right? So I love the idea that, because if we look at this for a sustainability standpoint, because one of the things that I liked about this is TRE is now being looked at, time restricted eating or fasting. It's been around since the dawn of time, right? Upton Sinclair, 1911, the fasting cure. You know, I came across it by Dr. Fung because you were doing it and it was working. And then I started reading his stuff and getting to his books and looking at the research. And this is where the podcast came from, because our lives are transformed from it.
Absolutely.
But TRE is promising as a dietary intervention because it may be a more feasible way to improve metabolic health compared to low and slow, long-term chronic calorie restriction,
right?
Due to adherence, right? But there's long-term studies recently that have, and we've talked about them, that have failed to support the idea that time-restricted eating or fasting is more effective than traditional diets when calories are equated. However, it seems that when the study participants were given a limited daily eating window, they're going to naturally restrict. That's the beauty of fasting. Then you get all of those additional physiological benefits, right? Because the people at the end of this study said the TRE group improved their overall health change at the end of the 12-week intervention. So what that is saying is that they actually saw themselves being healthier. Their view of their health at the end of the intervention.
Wow.
Why?
That's big.
Because the needle moved. They saw the result and they're like, whoa. They felt it, they saw it, they experienced it, and they're like, whoa. But I didn't make that big of a change, right? So that's why at the beginning we're like, yeah, it's 11 hours. Okay. Imagine if you did IF.
Yeah.
You've got considerable weight to lose. You've got considerable metabolic markers to reverse. The power lies in that whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
So I love that one of the outcomes here was, wow, this could be sustainable. And for some of you, it's not. Some of you need to track and you need to weigh and you need to do the exercise 60 minutes a day, 7 days a week. Like, it's not for everybody. The fasting lifestyle isn't for everyone, but it has the potential to be a long-term solution. And if it can be a long-term solution in this group, then, I mean, the rest of us that have the life stuff that comes up, being woken up by the dogs, the kids, the care for loved ones, whatever, the scrolling on TikTok, I think it could probably work for us too.
Yeah. A lot less frequent, a lot less to battle there. You know, I feel like, you know, your previous statement is so true. Like this could be a lifestyle, but not for everybody. But at the same time, like if you are tracking, you are weighing and, you know, doing the extra cardio like I was, you know, to build a little bit more of a caloric deficit right there. Ask yourself honestly, like, is it working? Like, is it getting me the results that I'm looking for? So, because if it's not, then now would be a heck of a good time to, like, you know, try something a little bit different, right? Like it's always uncomfortable to try something new, but that's where new growth happens, like right at the edge of our comfort zone. So like pushing yourself a little bit beyond that comfort zone right here. Like you said, it doesn't have to be drastically different. Right. You don't have to like set the world on fire to do something better and get a better result from it.
And that's where I love some people, this is quoted from the text, some people just find it easier to restrict when they eat rather than what they eat. And that is a great starting point. Because in shift work, the misalignment of food intake with circadian rhythms in metabolic processes is the contributing factor to chronic disruption, which that disruption is characterized by impaired metabolism, can lead to overconsumption. They say overnutrition, which I find interesting. Appetite dysregulation, sedentary behaviors, all of which are associated with the weight gain and the metabolic disease that kind of grows over time, right? So just the fact, a starting point of just changing the time, never mind what you eat. And again, it wasn't a huge drastic change here, right? About a 16% reduction, right? Between the two groups overall in both groups, the control and the TRE. But the time restricted eating, improving the metabolic health, regulating the daily rhythms of the liver, of the insulin effectiveness, of the glucagon signaling, of the fatty acid oxidation, burning your literal fat stores to lose the weight, right? Improving the digestion and health of the gut microbiome and regulating the appetite hormones, including leptin and ghrelin, from a 3-hour, just from focusing on moving the window just a little bit. So powerful for everyone that's listening.
Wow. And I want to go practical again here, because one of the like original objections to fasting or questions that we got when we first started the podcast was from some shift workers who were like, "This sounds awesome. I need this. I'm sedentary.
But how?
I'm in a truck, or I'm at the hospital, whatever it might be. But I feel like I'm really sedentary a lot of the time, and I don't really know how to do this because I'm on again, off again, that kind of thing. The schedules are always moving, so I always feel like I'm playing catch up between my sleep and the nutrition that I need to get in, and all these other kind of variables, So the permission for yourself to have to pick at least 2 different ways that you're going to implement some of these compartmentalization for time restricted eating, I feel like is a really important starting point, because for a lot of us, especially if you have perfectionist tendencies or you're, very analytical, it can feel like I can't do the same thing every day. So I really haven't found the perfect solution. Well, you might just need a flip side of the coin.
Ain't that life?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always like that, but that doesn't mean that you or your health have to suffer because of it. You may just need, literally you're doing shift work. You might need to have a plan shift. You might need an A plan and a B plan.
One when you're on or when you're off. Yeah.
And when you're off. Yeah. And that's okay. And maybe one's a little bit there's somebody in the group who mentioned that just the other day about when they're on the rig, it's a very different fasting schedule versus when they're off the rig. And it was one is maintenance mode. I'm just maintaining my results. And then the other one is I'm a little bit more aggressive or vigilant with my fasting. My eating window is a bit shorter and my fasting window is a bit longer. That's okay to switch back and forth like that. That's real life. And that equals long-term success right there.
Yeah. So for shift workers specifically, and I want to mention one thing as we wrap up today, Tommy, for everyone, is that what you just said was so powerful. Pick your schedule when on and when off. And it's 14 hours to 11 hours had all of these drastic changes.
Yeah.
So the magic is in the consistency, right? Absolutely. No matter then if we go zoom out to the population, general population, right? What about your weekends? Just like in this study, 1 out of 2 days were off compared to what the other 5 days were. That sounds like a weekday weekend situation to me, which if you've heard our fasting types conversation, then the majority of people identify with the weekend warrior, which is I do great during the week and then the weekend the wheels fall off, right? So just putting some intention on the weekend of moving that window a few hours can get you dramatic benefit and keep that momentum going from the week. Just like for the shift workers, you're on or off. What is your weekday plan? What is your weekend plan? What is your when you're on call plan? What is when you're off plan? Right?
Yeah.
And the power is in that simplicity and that consistency. So I just really love this. Shout out again to all the frontline workers. I love that they named the study, the Healthy Heroes study, right?
Yeah.
And we know the risk factors, the circadian rhythm disruptions and all that stuff that comes with it. So I just love this conversation today, Tommy. If you want to continue the conversation and get support for situations like this, 2 things you can do. One is you can go to the website, thefastingforlife.com/resources. You can grab our 1 meal a day fasting guide. If you've been doing some fasting already past that 14-hour, you're in that intermittent window, right? Fasting 16 8-hour window, you're still not seeing the results, it's still not consistent. Well, the 1 meal a day fat loss starting guide, right? The fast start guide can get you some to kind of level up your fasting skills.
Absolutely.
And then you can also come and join the conversation in our Fasting for Life community group on Facebook, which is a really cool group. I love the conversations that come in. We got new people joining organically, just coming in, finding us. We created that group because it is different than a lot of the other fasting groups that I was a part of, and I'm still a part of a few. But we want you to come and get the support and be around like-minded individuals that are on the same journey as you are. Because one of the things that this article said was, well, we need to look at whether or not this is sustainable long-term. And I'm like, okay, well, we're seeing it inside of our group. We're living proof that it is sustainable in the thousands of people that we've taken through our challenges now. So come join the conversation, Tommy. Be around like-minded individuals. You can talk about fasting because that's all we do 24/7 inside of that group and pretty much in our life. So excited. True story, right? Appreciate the conversation today. Thank you all for listening. And Tommy, we'll talk soon.
Cool. Thank you. Bye. So you've heard today's episode and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.